Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining our Heritage Park resident relocation meeting. We have a number of staff here today. I am Katie Librato. I'm the communications manager for Raleigh Housing Authority. So if you've received an email from us recently through our program MailChimp, that's from me. So if you ever have any questions or need clarification, please don't hesitate to just reply back to those. And I will turn it over to our Director of Housing Operations for her introductions.
Can you hear me okay?
We
Yes.
can.
Okay, great. I'm sorry, I'm having issues here jumping from one call to the other. I welcome you to the meeting. I see we do have Miss Lottie Bland, welcome, and another resident. We ask that you do find the chat box on your screen. Find the chat box, and if you could type your name in so we have a record of your attendance in case you have any follow-up questions that we need to reach back out to you. If you could find the chat box and type your name, and that's for our residents to do. As was stated, I'm Sonia Anderson, the Director of Housing Operations here. Our department encompasses your property management office, so the staff that works in your office, the maintenance staff, as well as our live-in maintenance technician, and at Heritage, that's Mr. Frank Dunn. And other coworkers who are on the call, they will introduce themselves as they present during the call. I'm so honored to have this position, and I look forward to working with you and the relocation team as you make some decisions that are best for your household. This will be a very personalized decision, and I think it's first important that I introduce my colleague, Kenya Pleasant, to you. She's going to talk about why the relocation plan is in place and why we need your opinions, and the Section 18 application that she will be submitting to HUD on behalf of Raleigh Housing Authority and our Heritage Park community. So Kenya, I'll turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you very much. Kenya Pleasant, and I am the Chief Real Estate Development Officer here at Raleigh Housing Authority, and my team oversees all of the development, whether that be new development and redevelopment efforts for the agency. And as Sonia noted, so I'm so happy that we're at this point now where we're going to start talking about moving forward with this Heritage Park project. And I first want to just acknowledge two other members of my team that are on, Rachel Agumbiade and Chris Whitenhill, are project managers here on the real estate development team. And they will be both be working on Heritage Park alongside with me. I think if we could go to the next slide. Yes. So we've been in a lot of meetings, and so we know that this has been a process for all members involved, and we are very appreciative of the participation from our residents as well as the broader community. And we now have a vision for Heritage Park. What you see on this slide is an indication of what the project looks like now and what we envision for the future. And that vision for the future was something that was developed collaboratively with the community and the residents. And although this is a very personal decision in terms of when we're going to start talking about relocation, we too hope to be moving and working collaboratively with residents. Next slide, please. So this gives you a little bit of background in terms of where we are in this process, in the redevelopment process. We've had over 11 meetings over the past year and change here to talk about the redevelopment of Heritage Park. And we are now at the point where I think we have gotten a lot of feedback where folks are really happy, where we're actually going to be starting to talk about the actual relocation. Before we can start the relocation, there's a process that we need to go through, and we need to get HUD approval. And that's the Section 18 application process. And that's what I'm going to focus on today and talking with you about. Next slide, please. So what does this mean? We have a plan now. Now what do we do? What's next? And again, we're going to be seeking HUD approval for something that's called a Section 18 application. It might also be commonly referred to as a demo dispo application. And this is an application that we're going to submit, and we're seeking approval for a couple of things. When HUD approves and signs off on this, they're signing off on several things. One is that HUD agrees that the cost of repairs is too high. And I think we've talked about this in some previous meetings, that the reason why we're at the table having this conversation about a redevelopment of Heritage Park is because of the condition of the property is so grave that the amount of money that we receive every month to operate the property, that the cost of repairs exceeds that exponentially. And so we did a study as a housing authority, we conducted a study where we had an engineer come in and do an assessment of what the cost of repairs are for Heritage Park. And based on HUD standards, the results from that report indicate that we can no longer use federal dollars for the rehabilitation of the project. So that's what this Section 18 application process is. This is a process that will enable us to go after other funding so that we can redevelop the property. So in this Section 18 application, when HUD approves it, they are signing off on, one, that the cost of the repairs is too high, and they agree with our assessment on that. Two, that they are signing off on our plans for the future of Heritage Park, which, if you saw on the previous slide, our plan is to redevelop Heritage Park. And that HUD is signing off on our plans for that redevelopment. They're also signing off on the fact that it's going to benefit low-income residents, and that will be included as part of our application. And they're also going to sign off on the relocation plan. So that's what it means when you hear us talk about this Section 18 application, Section 18 approval. This is the process. Next slide. And this is a little bit of the mechanics of what is included in the application and the process for that. One is that the property will be disposed of. So we're applying for what's called a Section 18 disposition application. And that means that we're going to convey or transfer Heritage Park to a new entity. But we will still be RHA will still be the control, have control of the site. So under HUD regulations, we do need to send it, that transfer does need to take place to a third party or a separate entity other than RHA, but it could be an affiliate of RHA, which will still give RHA control of the site. And so I think that there has been some conversations previously that RHA is selling the site to another party, and it will no longer be RHA controlled, and that's not true. We are required to transfer it to a third party, a separate entity. It could be an affiliate of RHA, but at the end of the day, the site will still be controlled by RHA. If this application, let's go back. Once the application is approved, as part of the Section 18 process, it allows RHA to also request what's called tenant protection vouchers for all of the occupied units. And what does that mean? That means that all of the residents will continue to have their rents where it will be based on their income. So there will still be subsidized income. That's what that voucher process allows. The Section 18 process, we're not requesting any additional dollars from HUD, but the approval does allow us again to seek funding for redevelopment so that we can realize the vision that we have all worked so hard to get to this point. Next slide. Go back. And in exchange, there's going to be certain asks that HUD has of us, right? So we are conveying this property or transferring the property to a separate entity, and we're going as part of the approval process. There's certain things that HUD is going to require and ask of us. And these are all things that we've talked about before at these meetings, where RHA is going to make a commitment to building at least 122 subsidized units. So when we come back and we do the redevelopment, we're going to have at least 122 units, which is the equivalent of all the units on the site currently. At least 122 will be subsidized units where rent will still be based on 30% of the income. The plan that we have in currently, the initial concept plan, I should say, that we've currently worked on as a community has shown where we can potentially build anywhere between 550 to 900 units. And so what we're committing to is that at least 122 of those will do a 1-for-1 replacement where those units will be subsidized. The remaining units will be focused on affordable housing, but those will be unsubsidized units. And it's expected that we're going to have a range of incomes that will be served through those non or unsubsidized units. The other promise and commitment that RHA is making is that all residents that are in good standing will have a right to return. I think that some of the, when you look at some of the previous Hope 6 redevelopments, there was some concerns about everyone's right to return and some of the requirements changing from the time from original to when it came time for people to move back. And one big change here is that all residents that are in good standing will have the right to return, and there will not be any specific work requirements for people to have that right to return. And last but not least is that RHA will pay reasonable costs of relocation for residents. And those are some of the commitments that RHA is going to have to make as part of this Section 18 approval. From a timing perspective, it's anticipated that we will submit our Section 18 application at the end of June. And the turnaround time for approval from HUD is typically anywhere from 60 to 90 days. And then once that approval is received, that's when we will officially be able to start relocating residents. But I know that, you know, this is there are going to be a lot of questions, but I want to take this opportunity now to turn it over to Laura McCann. Laura McCann is a member of the Raleigh Housing Authority team, and she's going to be heading up the relocation operations for Heritage Park.
Thank you, Kenya. Again, I'm Laura McCann. I will put my contact information in the chat box at the end, along with a couple other links and things. But I will be overseeing the relocation team. So that's going to be, I know, very important to Heritage residents as to what exactly happens. So the next 4 or so slides are specific to the relocation process and trying to address the big questions that we've gotten throughout this process. We want to make sure that you all are informed and that the relocation plan that we have currently out for comment right now is being made not just for the residents, but with the residents. We really want your voices to be incorporated in it, because at the end of the day, this is your household and your move and your, you know, roof over your head at night. So we want to make sure we're looking at everything from your perspective as well. First big question we get is, do I qualify for relocation assistance? So in order to qualify, you would need to answer yes to these questions. I am in the United States legally. If you're a Heritage Park resident, you should have already answered that yes. I am listed on a Heritage Park lease agreement. Again, if you're a resident, you should have that, no trouble. I have made my rent payments as scheduled, or you're in a repayment agreement with your property manager. So you would know that on an individual basis where you stand with your accounting, but that's going back to that, good standing status that Kenya was talking about in the previous slides. And then the last one is I am not being evicted by my manager. Again, that's a very personal question between you and your property manager. You should know the status of your account or any other deficiencies and be working with them to make sure that they're resolved so that you can make sure you get all of the relocation assistance that you could be eligible for. Next slide. So what does relocation assistance look like? The big thing that tenants like to know about is how much money am I getting, right? We all want to know that we're paying for everything we need for this move. So you're going to have two options here. You're going to have option one, which is going to be a fixed amount, and that's going to be based on your bedroom size. So the slide below shows 1 to 5 bedrooms, what that looks like for the Uniform Relocation Act, which is what we're going off of for these numbers. So you would find your bedroom size if you want this fixed amount, and that will show you the amount of funds that Raleigh Housing Authority would be paying to you for this option. The other option you have is to have something called actual reasonable moving costs. So you could have, let's say, more than what's on the chart above, or you could have less. It depends on how much you actually spend as a resident. Now, that's going to be a harder process from the resident perspective because you're going to have to do things like budgeting, and you're going to have to keep up with those receipts so that at the end of the day, we can make sure that everything matches up and that the numbers are the same. And it's your choice completely what you want to pick out of those two options, but we'll work with you when we bring staff on board and do a one-on-one case management to help you figure out what's best for your family. Next slide. Okay, so that's the dollar amount that we're looking at with the relocation assistance, but that's not where the relocation assistance ends. Like I mentioned, we're going to have a team come on board, and it's going to be relocation staff. They're going to be meeting with everybody one-on-one, and we're going to be helping looking at other ways that Raleigh Housing Authority can help you with this transition. So the first thing we're going to ask you to do is to complete a resident survey. That's going to give us that feedback on what your household needs, what your plans are. Do you want to stay in public housing or get a voucher? Do you have transportation issues? Do you need to be near a employer or a medical facility if you have things of those natures? So that's going to be start one. We need you to start with that survey. And we're going to meet with you one-on-one and have mobility counseling and advice with that. So we are really going to be digging in on an individual basis and making sure we know what everybody needs. At the end of the day, we're going to want you to be in a home that is either the same fundamentally as where you are, or hopefully even better, in an even nicer place. I know a lot of the landlords that we have been working with to try to help make sure that there are openings lined up for Heritage residents are brand new. Not to say all of them will be, but the ones that we've been working with are. So there is a very large chance that you might have a home that is even better than the one you're coming out of. And we're really excited to have that as one of the options for you. All right. And so where are you going to go and when are you going to go there? The options that we can work with you on are to either transfer you to another RHA public housing community or site. We have about 12 other communities for you to choose from. That'll depend on, what your needs are. What bedroom size? Do you have accessibility needs? You need a flat unit? But those are all going to be options. Like they said earlier in the meeting, one of the things we've heard from the resident feedback is that there were some big feelings with the Hope 6 properties having work requirements. So anybody specific to Heritage Park that is relocating, those will be waived for you. So you will not have to worry about that. Another option is to have a Section 8 tenant-based voucher. That's what you typically think of when you think of the Section 8 program. It's going to be a housing choice voucher or something similar that we give to you and you take it. and you go find an independent landlord, and then Raleigh Housing Authority helps you make that rent payment to the landlord with you paying your 30% and Raleigh Housing Authority covering the difference. The other option is a project-based voucher. That's new to the Raleigh Housing Authority portfolio. So that would be with a voucher that is already in place at a unit or at a community, and you would simply be moving into that community, and that voucher would already be there for you. And then again, it's still the 30%, so that we're not getting away from that during this move. You're still going to have affordable rent, and you would pay that rent then, and they would be your landlord at that community. And we're going to be working with you to see what your options are, what your preferences are. We want to know at the end of the day what you want to see and do our best to make that happen for you. But on the off chance that option one doesn't come through for you, we're always going to have fallback options because we've got 3 on the table here. And no matter what option you go with, you're not going to lose your housing assistance because of this redevelopment. So worst case scenario, you want something and it doesn't work out, we're automatically going to put you into the program that does work out for you. So we want it to be your first choice, but if that doesn't pan out, please know you're not losing your housing assistance. It might just look a little bit different than what you had previously envisioned, okay? And then the other question we get a lot is, can you come back? Can you move back to Heritage Park after this whole thing is said and done? Absolutely. We want you to come back. We want you to have that opportunity. There will be a couple of things that we have to ask you to do for that to happen. So you're going to have the right to return. Absolutely have the right to return. That's going to be up to you whether you want to move or not. We understand that moving is a big deal, and some people might get comfortable and they might not want to come back. That's absolutely fine. That's your call at the end of the day. But if you want to come back, we want you to come back. And that is assuming you still have that good standing that we talked about earlier. Another benefit that we're going to have for returning residents is that we're going to open the wait list before it goes out to the public. So what that means is we'll have a period of time where we're reaching out to former residents and asking, hey, do you want to come back? If so, here's the application. Please put your name in. We want to make sure that we are prioritizing returning residents over the general public. Another thing we're going to do is we're going to give you what's called a preference for your application. What that means is it gives you more points, and more points puts you up at that top of the waiting list. So you should have 2 things working in your favor to get you to the top of the waiting list. 1, you're going to be able to put your name in earlier. And 2, you're going to get that preference that gives you more points and helps you rise up to that top number 1 point for the next move. And then another thing that RHA has agreed to do, which has not been done in the past, is that we want to help pay to move you back on site if that's what you want. So those figures that we talked about, that money assistance earlier, we're going to offer the same thing for you to come back if that's what you want. We don't want your financial situation to be the thing that stops you from moving back. If you want to move back, then RHA is going to work to find a way to help you get back on site, including helping paying for that move. But those are really the big questions that we've gotten from residents. Not to say that you can't ask us more questions on this call or reach out after, but those are the big things that residents are really focused on, and absolutely rightly so, because this is, your move. You want to know how it affects you. Some other things that I'll go ahead and point out on this call is that we will have a June meeting. And this June meeting will be, again, focused on redevelopment. But before that June meeting, you're probably still going to get communications from staff asking you to come in, update that survey if you haven't done it, meet with staff, get information back. So you'll definitely hear from us between now and then. Another thing is that we have that draft relocation plan. It is currently out for comment. It will be out through the end of the month, and it is going to have a June 1st effective date. So if you wouldn't mind taking the time to read through it, make sure you have any questions answered. Let us know if there's something that we've, missed, not thought of, that you want to see if it's eligible to be included. And we can absolutely help incorporate those comments and considerations into this plan before it becomes effective. Now is the time, if you have those comments, put them out there so we can make sure they're incorporated. We've put what we think we have heard from the residents, but again, we want you to double check us and make sure that that's, accurately in the plan and that it is what it should be and what you want to see it to be. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're going to have to follow when all of this relocation starts. Do we have any questions or comments from the residents on the call?
And I've added those 2 links in the chat for anyone who wants to go ahead and click on those before we hang up.
Thank you, Katie. And I'm going to go ahead and put my email in here while I'm thinking about it because I mentioned I would. Feel free to reach out anytime. I know after Monday's meeting, we went till about 8:30 Tuesday morning, first thing, like 8 a.m. I got a phone call from a resident and she said, I'm so mad. I couldn't call you after that meeting last night and I had to sleep and then wake up and call you. So please feel free to reach out anytime.
If there's any questions, just speak up. Oh, go ahead. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, I wanted to highlight that the project-based vouchers are something new and how easy it will be to relocate with them. You won't have to find a landlord. I know some of my residents at Heritage have received vouchers before in the past and were not successful finding a landlord to accept their voucher. So I'm really excited about the partnership Raleigh Housing Authority has with some projects of new construction here in Raleigh where they can utilize what's called the project-based voucher there. So I think that's going to really help the families at Heritage.
Absolutely. And another good thing to point out with that, thank you for the reminder, is that some of these project-based vouchers are coming online before we're technically and hopefully going to get approval from HUD. And so what that means is that we have created a category in this relocation plan of early movers. These may be people who would be moving from any time between now and when we technically get that approval. So if you have a Section 8 application on file and you're wanting to move to one of those new properties, we can absolutely make that happen and you would still be eligible for the same relocation assistance. It would just be in that early mover category. We do want to make sure our residents have the opportunity to move into those units that, like Ms. Sonia said, they are brand new. They're going to be great units. And we don't want you to miss out on that just because the official relocation process might not start until the fall. We would just put you in a different category. Again, same benefits, same relocation payment, same assistance from staff. It would just be a little bit ahead of the official relocation start.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, Laura. If they do choose to receive a project-based voucher
Mhm.
in one of the new properties, will there be, when they apply for they would still have to apply through the property, through like put an application in with the property that the project-based voucher would be associated with.
Yes, yes, correct. So under the voucher program, we're going to be splitting a little bit between what you're used to seeing with the public housing program. So RHA is only going to do the subsidy for your rent at that point. You would have to apply for that project-based voucher or that independent landlord to be your landlord. So you would have to put in whatever their regular application process is.
And if there's like, because sometimes I understand that there's a credit pull. What if the excuse me, I'm maybe going into too much right now, but I'm just trying to understand if there's like, so if they say that they're interested in this property and we say that we will do the project-based voucher for that property, but they apply for that property and because of their income, they may not qualify, but you know what do you understand what I'm saying? Like so their income may not qualify them for that property, or will it be a different qualification because the housing authority is going to pay the 30%?
Yeah, so
I mean,
everybody,
the above the 30%, whatever.
yeah, everybody going on a voucher is gonna have to do whatever that application process is, whether it's, asking for landlord references, credit screening, physically filling out an application, which RHA staff can sit down and help you do. They would still have to go through that process. We would hope that everybody would be income qualifying since they are still within the income limits between the two programs. But they would have to meet whatever criteria that landlord runs.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think we need to look into that. Like, let me, if I can better understand your question, Suzanne. You're saying if the rent is $1,000 and somebody has to meet the requirement where they make
3 times the rent.
3 times the rent, if you're only paying, chances are our residents may not meet that qualification. Is that your concern? Yeah, my understanding, and this is something that we do need to look into further, is that I think that it's skewed based on, not skewed, but I think that the rent calculation is based on the tenant portion paid rent. But I think that's a good question and a level of detail where I think that's part of our excuse me, I think that's part of the tenant selection process for the vouchers, but we can get some clarification on that. I'm sure that will be a question that other residents will have as well.
Yeah, and as far as deposits go, one of the things in the relocation plan that we specify we're willing to help with is that deposit process. So if you are transferring between public housing communities in the past, we've had different levels of deposits collected, and then we've asked if people transfer and that deposit is lower on their current account than it would be on their new account for them to make up that difference. We're not doing that. We're just accepting whatever your current security deposit level is for that new move within public housing. And then for the Section 8 program, we also have some things outlined as far as, expediting the security deposit returns to try to help with that new landlord amount. We could help try to work with tenants to find things like benevolent funds that might help them collect some assistance to help with that security deposit. And then there's an option where if the person still can't pay that security deposit, Mr. Ashley has agreed to help with RHA covering potentially the difference of that deposit, with the exception that that money is considered more of a loan and would be expected to be returned to Raleigh Housing Authority when the day comes that that person leaves the assistance, and not recouping whatever portion RHA paid. So there are certainly things in that plan to try to help look at that security deposit, but it's definitely something we can look into further.
And we do have one question online.
Mhm.
You can go ahead and speak up. Or type your question in the chat if you prefer, and I can read it for you. Does anyone else have any questions? Oh, that's no problem. That's okay. We're having some audio difficulties. We'll be just a second for the question.
Would it help if we unmute everyone? I don't know how that works.
I tried to unmute that particular one, but I don't know that I can unmute everybody without,
Oh.
like, I can't make them unmute, I guess. I can do an ask to unmute and that's it.
Okay.
So, but feel free to type a question in the chat box if that's easier. I'm happy to read that for you. And anyone else that has any questions, feel free to jump in. Oh, we've got somebody coming back in. Hi.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm
We
at
can hear you
work
now.
and
Go
my
ahead.
microphone was off. Okay, so I have
That's
a
okay.
question because when I originally moved, I stayed in Walnut Terrace and I was working at NC State University. That's how I ended up getting in, but I was only for some, I don't know how she based my rent off of 9 months. So there was a time in November where I was out on Thanksgiving break and they ended up saying that I had to transfer because I hadn't worked 35 hours or more during like 2 weeks. So they ended up transferring me over there. So I know when I originally got in the program with income based that it was like a 10-year max, I guess. And I don't know if I'm like, I know that it's coming up on the 10 years, but I don't know with me being transferred, did it continue or how would that go? Would I be able to still come back or?
Yeah,
Because
so
I stayed there and it's been hard to kind of reach people. We had a lot of managers and I kind of just feel stagnant now. Because I mean, I work 2 jobs. Like my rent is almost $1,000 over there. So I just been feeling like I just got stuck. I wasn't comfortable in the house or anything, but I needed somewhere to stay. So I just want to know with that 10-year mark, would I be able to come back or should I just start finding like regular housing?
right. So that's a great question. We are looking at handling Heritage Park differently than we have with the Hope 6 and Hope 7 properties, which Walnut Terrace is one of them. And what that means is we're not going to have those limitations and requirements for those 3 properties that we've redeveloped at Heritage Park. So that should not impact you either with moving out of Heritage Park when it's time to relocate, and you should be able to still move back into Heritage Park if you choose to come back. So that
Okay.
would not impact you. That's one of the things we want to make sure is that that's not a barrier for residents. Either
Okay.
way, going out or coming back if you want to do that.
Okay. Thank you so much. That was my major concern because I know I was coming up on my 10-year, but I didn't know if it like went, to the next, apartment complex that I moved to, or would I have to just move out with that 10-year max?
Right. So that'll be waived for the Heritage residents impacted by relocation.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's a great question. We've actually had other people ask the same thing. So we're going to have that in some notes. And just as a follow-up to that, on our website, we've been posting a lot of resources. I mentioned that we have links to the resident survey that'll help us know what your relocation preferences are. There's also a link to the relocation draft plan. And so comments for that are due May 31st. We also have been taking some pretty decent notes during the meetings. We're going to post the notes once we complete our review of this call so that we can make sure we've captured everybody's questions. We're going to have notes from the calls and the questions all in one document. We're then going to post, in addition to that, we'll post the questions on the website in a section that we have specifically for Heritage Park FAQ. We'll have a copy of the slides that's already online. I've posted, I think I did the link. I posted the link of the recording from the first meeting we had, and then we'll have last night's and today's meetings posted as well, just in case you want to zip back on and capture something you missed. And we'll also be emailing out in case you missed it. So if you have any neighbors who said they weren't able to make it to any of our meetings, not a problem. They'll get an email with links to all of the things I just mentioned and a reminder for our June meeting that's coming up at the end of that month. Team, did I miss anything else in the summary?
No, I think that's it. I just want to clarify on the June meeting, it's going to be 2 separate things. We're going to have a meeting in person at 6:30 at the Learning Center at Heritage Park, and that's going to be specifically to talk about the Section 18 application as well as the relocation. And then during the day, more details to come about the office hours, just to ask questions about the proposed redevelopment, if there's any questions specific about the initial concept plan.
Great, thank you. I'll be sure that all of the communications reflect those two details for that day.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mhm. Anyone else? Any last comments from staff before we end the call? All right. Well, we really appreciate it. And if you again have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. The Heritage Manager email is here on this slide. There's a couple of links there, and then Laura has her direct email in the chat. So we look forward to working with you soon.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.